Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. Some betrayals are not hidden. They are staged. That is what makes them so disorienting. When a spouse humiliates you in public and then calls your pain insecurity, pay attention to the order of events. The lie is bad, but the performance tells you even more. A person who protects their image before they protect your trust is already choosing themselves over the marriage. That does not mean you have to become cruel. It means you need to get clear faster than your feelings want you to. The night my wife spent our anniversary with her ex, I was standing under the yellow awning of a crab house near the harbor, checking my watch every 30 seconds like a man trying not to look up. It was early October in Baltimore, the kind of cold that slips under your collar without earning the right. I had a reservation for 8, a wrapped box in my coat pocket, and a wife who had texted me at 6:15 saying she got held up at work. At 6:42, I opened Twitter and saw a picture of her laughing beside another man, her hand around a coupe glass, captioned, "I do not owe anyone an explanation." If you already know this anniversary is about to go completely wrong, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who loves real relationship drama, and subscribe for more stories about betrayal consequences and unforgettable revenge. And tell me in the comments right now, if your spouse posts a night out with an ex on your anniversary, would you confront them immediately or stay silent and plan your next move? That is how she wrote it too. No explanation. Explain, like she was typing too fast or too pleased with herself to care. The tweet sat there under her smiling face like a dare. Then came the second line beneath it. Real women do not ask permission. I knew the bar at once because of the blue tile behind the counter and the ridiculous citrus peel twist they put in every drink. It was a place called Juniper Room in Mount Vernon, where she once told me the lighting made everyone look expensive. Her ex, Terrence, was in the photo with her, leaning in easily like some door had never fully closed. My name is Malachi Brooks. I was 36 that fall, a transit electrician for the city, which meant I spent my days in a maintenance bay under fluorescent lights, keeping buses alive long after other people would have pronounced them dead. I like work that could be traced. Wire to fuse. Problem to cause. Damage to repair. Marriage, I learned, is not like that. My wife, Nia, was 34 and worked as a development director at a small arts nonprofit that hosted donor dinners full of white wine, soft jazz, and people who said community like they had invented the word. She was smart, polished, and very good at making bad behavior sound principled. We had been married 4 years. Together, almost 8. We lived in a narrow brick row house in West Baltimore on a block where everybody noticed everything but pretended not to. Ms. Cole's next door watered her mums in house shoes and knew which couples were fighting by the way their screen doors shut. On Saturdays, Mr. Dennis down the alley played old gospel from a garage radio while he fixed bicycles for neighborhood kids. Nia used to say she loved our block because it felt lived in. I loved it because it kept me honest. You cannot fake steadiness in a place where your neighbors have seen you carry groceries, grief, and busted furniture. That anniversary was supposed to be simple. I had taken the afternoon off, gone by Lexington Market for her favorite peach cobbler from a stand with a line out the side, then stopped at a jeweler in Charles Village to have my mother's bracelet clasp repaired. The small wrap box in my pocket was not a ring. We were already married. It was the bracelet, cleaned and fixed, because Nia had admired it in a photo of my mother for years. I thought it would mean something that I was ready to hand her a piece of my family history. Looking back, that detail still stings in a quiet place behind my ribs. I did not call right away. That surprises people when I tell this story. They imagine rage first, volume first, a man slamming his pride around like a chair in a cheap play. But when I saw that tweet, I did not feel rage. I felt my mind go extremely still. The kind of stillness that comes when your body recognizes a danger your heart is not ready to name. I sat on a bench outside the restaurant and read her post again. Then I clicked her profile and found a second tweet posted 3 minutes later. Insecure men always want a woman small enough to manage. I knew then it was not an accident, not a misunderstanding, not one drink that turned into awkward optics. She was building a case in public before I had even spoken in private. That told me two things. One, she expected I would object because she knew this crossed a line we had discussed before. Two, she wanted witnesses before consequences arrived. Nia had a habit of narrating events in a way that made her the only person with dimensions. Everybody else became an obstacle, a stereotype, a lesson. If she was free, then somebody else had to be controlling. That was how she kept her conscience from getting in the way. I canceled a reservation with a hostess who looked at me with careful pity. I thanked her, which I regret only because my voice sounded so normal. Then I walked to my truck and sat there without starting it. The harbor was crowded, horns in the distance, a siren somewhere uptown. A couple crossed in front of my headlights, laughing over a paper bag of fries. I opened our text thread. At 5:58, Nia had written, "Do I need a coat or is the place warm?" At 6:11, "Please tell me they have dessert." At 6:15, "Baby, emergency board thing. I may be late. Go ahead and order me something pretty." It is hard to explain how humiliation can turn your own memories against you in real time. I read those texts and started revisiting the last 6 months with a different set of eyes. Her late nights, her new interest in keeping her phone face down, the way she had. Started saying things like, "I need room to be a full person," whenever I asked ordinary marriage questions like what time she would be home. Room, space, freedom, words that sound healthy until somebody uses them as a curtain. Terrence's name had come up twice that summer. Once because he had launched a clothing line. Once because he had matured so much. Terrence was not a mystery figure from long ago. He was part of the argument we never finished. They had dated before me, on and off through their 20s. And according to Nia, they ended because he was charismatic in public and chaotic in private. "He collects admiration," she had said once while folding towels. That man could flirt with a streetlight. I believed her because I had no reason not to. When she told me they still occasionally exchanged birthday texts or reacted to each other's work posts, I said I did not love it. She told me mature people did not erase history, just to soothe a partner's insecurity. I should have pushed harder then, not to control her, to clarify terms. There is a difference. A boundary is not, "You are forbidden." A boundary is, "I will not stay where this is treated as normal." Back then, though, I wanted to be the kind of husband who was secure enough to withstand modern ideas without sounding old-fashioned or afraid. I came from a family where faithfulness was not discussed like a trend. It was baked into the walls. My parents had problems, real ones, but they did not audition alternatives in public while calling it personal growth. I mistook my silence for trust. It was actually avoidance dressed up nice. My first decision point came right there in the truck. I could have driven straight to the Juniper Room and confronted them at the bar. Part of me wanted to. I wanted to see her face when she realized the audience she courted had become flesh and breath. 6'2" in work boots, standing under low amber light. But I knew that scene would become her evidence. She would call me dramatic. Terrence would get to play calm. Strangers would look up from their cocktails and decide they understood my marriage from one heated minute. So I did not go. I chose absence over spectacle, even though my pride begged for another choice. Instead, I drove home through neighborhoods that looked unchanged by my private disaster. Kids cut through the corner lot with footballs under their arms. A woman in pink scrubs waited at a bus stop, scrolling her phone with the same posture Nia used when she was irritated. At a red light on North Avenue, I saw a billboard for personal injury lawyers smiling harder than any human ever should. I remember absurd things from that drive because my mind refused the center of the problem. It wanted side details. The squeak in my windshield wiper. The smell of old coffee in the cup holder. Anything except my wife with her shoulders pressed to another man. When I got to the house, I did what I always do when I cannot think straight. I cleaned. I folded the dish towel by the sink. I wiped down the counter that did not need wiping. I put away the good glasses I had set out for the bourbon she said she wanted after dinner. Then I sat at the kitchen table under the humming overhead light and opened Twitter again. She had posted a third time. Not a photo this time. Just text. Some people hear wife and think of ownership. The replies below were full of strangers feeding her exactly what she came for. Stand in your truth. Protect your peace. Men hate bold women. That sentence about ownership did something to me. Not because it was clever, because it was dishonest. I had never treated Nia like property. I did the grocery runs because she hated crowded stores. I cooked most Sundays because my grandmother taught me every good marriage needs at least one person who knows how to season without measuring. I learned the names of her board members, sat through donor galas, helped hang framed prints for a spring fundraiser until my shoulders ached. I did not need gratitude for those things. But I also was not going to let her repaint basic marital respect as oppression just because she wanted to do wrong with elegant vocabulary. My second decision point came when I considered posting anything at all. Silence can be dignified, but it can also leave a lie uncontested while it grows legs. I did not want a public war. I hate public wars. I especially hate when private pain turns into social performance. But she had already moved our anniversary onto a stage and cast me in a role I did not accept. So I made a choice. One sentence, no insults, no thread, no begging. I quote tweeted her post and wrote, "You owe me nothing. You just lost access to everything built on trust." Then I attached a picture of the repaired bracelet in its blue velvet box. I did not explain the bracelet. People figured enough out from context. A gift meant for our anniversary. A husband sitting somewhere alone. A wife posting revolutionary slogans from a cocktail bar with her ex. The response came fast and ugly in every direction. Some people cheered me. Some said I was manipulative for making the moment public after she had already done exactly that. Some insisted there must be more to the story. There's always a crowd eager to believe missing context will rescue bad character. But the only person whose interpretation mattered that night was Nia's, and I knew she had seen it when my phone started ringing before the tea kettle finished warming. Her first call, I let ring out. The second two. Then came texts. "What are you doing? Why would you post that? Delete it now." Then another. "Are you seriously embarrassing me over dinner?" Dinner. That word nearly made me laugh. As if this was about choosing the wrong restaurant. As if the issue was timing instead of betrayal. I read each message without replying. I wanted one honest sentence from her. Just one. "I should not have done this. I knew this would hurt you. I am sorry." But Nia's instinct, even cornered, was always to negotiate the optics before facing the damage. She was not panicking about me. She was panicked about the narrative. I walked upstairs and stood in our bedroom. Tried to listen to what my self-respect was saying under the noise. Our room still looked married. Her silk scarf draped over the vanity mirror. The eucalyptus hand cream she bought from a boutique and insisted was life-changing. 2 books on her nightstand. One face down, as if she meant to come back to it in an hour. I opened the closet and saw her dresses arranged by color, a system she once called visual peace. That sight broke something small in me because it looked like a shared future. Then I remembered the tweet. Some people hear wives and think of ownership. The house was mine before the marriage. That matters legally and emotionally. When we married, I refinanced in my name only because her credit was still recovering from old student loan issues, and we agreed we would revisit it later. We never did. She contributed to bills, absolutely, and to the home in other ways too. I will not rewrite history just because she betrayed me. But that night, I understood a practical truth. If I let the conversation drift into tears and circular arguments, she would stay in that room by momentum alone. So I took 3 suitcases from the hall closet and started packing only what was clearly hers. I was not reckless about it. I did not throw anything. I folded her clothes because anger was not going to be the thing I remembered about myself. I packed her green wool coat, the one she wore to every winter gala, her framed photo of her late Annie in church white, her makeup organizer with the chipped gold zipper. Her legal pads are full of donor notes in small, neat print. I separated anything joint from anything personal. Marriage trains you to tangle lives. Unmarrying begins with details. As I packed, I kept hearing our pastor from years earlier saying love without truth becomes performance. I had always assumed he meant tenderness. That night, I heard the rest of it. Halfway through packing, my sister Rochelle called. Rochelle is older than me by 6 years, a middle school principal with no patience for self-deception, and a laugh that can clear a room. She had seen the tweet exchange because one of her teacher friends sent with a message that said, "Please tell me this is not your brother." I answered because Rochelle is one of the few people who can ask hard questions without making you feel skinned. "Tell me the facts," she said. Not how I felt, not whether I was okay, just the facts. I told her. When I finished, she exhaled and said, "Do not let her explain disrespect into a philosophy." Rochelle came over within 20 minutes carrying a plastic container of turkey chili, because that is how my family loves people. By acting like food can anchor the soul long enough for reason to arrive. She took one look at the suitcases by the stairs and nodded once. "Good," she said. "Neat is better than messy." We sat at the kitchen table, my phone face down between us like a trapped insect. She did not encourage revenge. She did not tell me to trash Nia online. She just reminded me of who I had been before the marriage made me too willing to absorb confusion. "She can be sorry," Rochelle said. "That does not mean she is safe." Nia got home a little after 10, not to a locked gate like in some dramatic video, but to a deadbolt I had changed in 3 suitcases on the front stoop under the porch light. Rochelle stood beside me in the living room while I watched from the window. Nia's heels hit the concrete in sharp little strikes. Terrence's black SUV idled at the curb for a few seconds before pulling off. That detail mattered more than I expected. He did not even walk her to the door. Whatever story she was selling online, he was not trying to help her carry it inside. She stared at the luggage, then at her phone, then banged once hard on the door. I opened it with the chain still on. Her perfume came in before her voice, expensive and floral, and familiar enough to make me hate my own memory. "Malachi, open this door." She looked beautiful and furious, what had gotten her out of many difficult conversations in life. "For what?" I asked. She blinked, thrown by the question. "To talk, obviously." I looked past her on the street. "You had hours to talk. You chose Twitter." Rochelle moved into view then, not as a threat, just as a witness. Nia's posture changed when she saw my sister. She hated being seen clearly by people who could not be charmed. "This is insane," she said. "You're blowing one thing up because your ego got bruised." I asked her a question I already knew she would not answer directly. "Why today?" She looked at me like the question was beneath her. "Terrence wanted to discuss a sponsorship lead for the center. It ran late. We got drinks. It is not a crime." "On our anniversary," Rochelle said quietly. Nia snapped, "I am not talking to you." Then back to me. "You act like I cheated because I had a drink." The problem with people who live by technicalities is they think vows work like loopholes. They think if they avoid one category wrong, the rest disappears. "You lied." I said, "You missed our anniversary. You spent it with your ex. Then you posted those tweets to make me the villain before I said a word." Her face tightened, but not with shame, with inconvenience. "Because I knew you would react exactly like this." That sentence landed harder than everything else. Not because it was smart, but because it revealed the full architecture. She anticipated pain and chose the action anyway, then pre-framed my response as proof of my weakness. That is not a misunderstanding. That is premeditated disrespect. I felt something go cold and orderly inside me. The part of me still hoping for a human explanation finally sat down and got quiet. I handed her a folder. Inside was a cashier's check for the amount she had put toward the upcoming month's utilities, plus a handwritten inventory of what I had packed and what still needed pickup. I had written it while Rochelle heated chili. Practicality is underrated in moments like this. It keeps grief from slipping into the theater. Nia stared at the folder like I had insulted her. "So that is it? 8 years and checklist," she asked. "No," I said. 8 years in your choices. This is just the part that happens after." She looked over my shoulder into the house as if marriage itself might still be visible somewhere, waiting to be appealed. She cried then, but it came late and thin, as if her body had noticed tears were finally the correct instrument. I do not say that to be cruel. I say it because timing tells its own truth. She did not cry at the restaurant she skipped. Not online while calling me insecure. Not on the ride home from her ex's car. She cried at the threshold of consequence. Please do not do this in front of Rochelle, she said. I nearly told her she had done much worse in front of strangers. Instead, I said, call your mother, call a friend, but you are not staying here tonight. Then I closed the door. She called my phone from the porch 5 times before leaving. Then her mother called. Then our pastor. Then 2 mutual friends who wanted to hear both sides. I did not answer any of them that night. I sat at the kitchen table with Rochelle and finally ate the chili, though it tasted like warm cardboard because shock flattens flavor. Around midnight, I heard rain start tapping the front windows. Rochelle washed the bowl I had barely touched and told me to go upstairs and sleep in my own bed because surrendering the room out of sadness was how bitterness got the upper hand. I slept maybe 90 minutes, all of them shallow and full of unfinished conversations. The next morning, Baltimore looked rinsed. Gray sky, wet stoops. The church across the avenue had a food pantry line forming under umbrellas. Life had resumed without consulting me. That offended me a little, which is how I knew I was still in the first stage of hurt, where your private collapse seems like it should delay traffic. I called a lawyer before work, a woman Rochelle recommended who handled separations with a level voice and no melodrama. Her first question was not whether I wanted to forgive Nia. It was whether there were shared accounts, shared debt, or any property that needed protecting immediately. That question steadied me in a way prayer had not yet. Over the next week, I learned how slowly consequences actually move compared to the speed of humiliation. Twitter had turned our anniversary into a spectacle in under an hour. Real life required forms, signatures, mail notices, calm explanations at the bank, and a spreadsheet for recurring bills. Nia moved into her cousin's condo in Randallstown. Then, according to the rumor chain that always forms around fallen couples, she spent 3 nights at her mother's house because the cousin needed space. That detail might sound petty to mention, but instability often arrives wrapped in the same language that justified the original betrayal. Everybody wants a room until the room has a mattress and a deadline. She sent me emails after I blocked her number. Email makes people sound smarter than they are, or at least more rehearsed. In the first one, she said she was sorry for the optics. That phrase told me everything. Optics. No harm. Not deceit. Not dishonor. In the second, she said she had been feeling unseen in the marriage and made a reckless choice out of resentment. That was closer to truth, maybe, but still built to distribute blame evenly. I replied once. Only once. I wrote, feeling unseen is a conversation. Publicly shaming your spouse with an X is a decision. Those are not the same. Then I stopped feeding the loop. The bracelet stayed in its velvet box on my dresser for months. I could not give it to anyone else, obviously, could not return it. It belonged to my mother before she died, and a repaired class suddenly felt like a metaphor too obvious for literature, but annoyingly accurate for life. Some things can be restored and still never be offered in the same spirit again. On Sundays after church, I would catch myself looking at the box, as if meaning might have changed overnight. It never did. My mother's bracelet taught me a hard lesson that fall. Family heirlooms and trusts have this in common. Once you place them in careless hands, you spend a long time grieving the risk itself. People always ask about Terrence, as if he is the center because he was in the photo. He was not. He was a tool, a symbol, an accelerant. The Rayall injury came from Nia's willingness to turn our marriage into proof of her own fearlessness. Terrence texted me once, surprisingly, a short message from an unknown number. I did not know it was your anniversary. She told me y'all were having problems. I read it 3 times. Maybe it was true. Maybe it was an attempt to rinse his conscience with partial honesty. I did not reply. Whether he was deceived too or simply convenient did not alter my actual problem, which wore my last name. Still, his message forced another revision of the story in my head. Nia had not just lied to me. She had likely lied sideways, upward, and outward to everybody involved. That is another thing cheating-adjacent betrayal does. Even when you never get a full confession, it makes you understand how many rooms a person is willing to populate with different versions of themselves. At work, under buses, I found myself thinking about the current. Electricity always seeks a path. So does self-justification. It moves through the easiest channels first. The more resistance truth offers, the more creative dishonesty becomes. I had married a woman who could speak beautifully about integrity while bypassing it entirely. Thanksgiving came before the paperwork did. My family did not ask me to bring anyone, which I appreciated. They just sent group texts about greens, cornbread, and whether Uncle Vernon was banned from discussing local politics before dessert. I went to Rochelle's house in Columbia and spent half the afternoon teaching her son how to fix the belt on an old cassette deck I found at a flea market. That is one of my peculiar habits. I collect broken radios, tape players, and turntables, not because they are worth money, but because I trust old machines more than trends. They tell you what they need if you listen closely. My nephew said, "Uncle Kai, why keep stuff people threw away?" I said, "Because some things deserve a proper diagnosis first." The marriage, I knew by then, did not. Diagnosis requires cooperation. Nia was still trying to manage reputation. She posted less after the anniversary disaster, but when she did, the tone had shifted from defiant to abstract. Quotes about healing, posts about making mistakes. One black and white photo of rain on a window with the caption, "Growth is expensive." I wanted to laugh at that too, but grief had worn my sarcasm down into fatigue. She was not growing. She was revising. There's a difference. Growth usually includes specifics. Revision swaps vocabulary until consequences sound poetic. I muted her rather than block her again, because by then I no longer needed the drama of refusal. Distance had become enough. In December, she asked through our lawyer for an in-person meeting to seek closure. That phrase is another one I no longer trust. Closure often means one person wants relief from the discomfort of being remembered accurately. I considered refusing. Then I considered accepting just to satisfy the old version of me that still wanted a final coherent answer. After a day of thinking, I agreed, but only at my lawyer's office. Not a cafe, not a park, not any soft setting where memory might confuse civility for possibility. That was my third meaningful decision in this story, and maybe the healthiest. Closure does not require warmth. Sometimes it only requires walls, witnesses, and a clock. She arrived in a camel coat I had once told her made her look like she belonged in old photographs of ambitious women. She looked tired now, not ruined, not tragic, just diminished by the effort of living inside competing stories too long. When we sat down, she apologized more cleanly than she had before. "I wanted to hurt you," she said, eyes lowered to a legal pad she never wrote on. "Not like this. I thought if you looked jealous, I would feel powerful." I believe that sentence because it was ugly enough to be true. Some people cheat for thrill, some for escape, some because resentment matures into a hunger for proof that they can still move your soul around. "Why were you so angry?" I asked. "I was there," she said after long silence, "in the marriage, in the house, doing the things, and I still felt like the supporting cast in your steadiness." That answer was honest in the way broken mirrors are honest. You can see yourself, but not without distortion. My steadiness had become, to her, an accusation. My routines, my work, my loyalty, all the dull, unglamorous things that hold a life together had made her feel less vivid. That was never something I could have solved with better flowers or deeper talks, because the problem was not neglect. The problem was that she required turbulence to feel centered. I did not comfort her. I also did not attack. I simply told the truth, as I had finally learned to hold it. "You did not just break trust," I said. "You trained me to watch how you think." She looked up then, actually puzzled. I continued. "You lied before the act, performed during it, defended after it, and only confessed when options ran out. That pattern is bigger than one anniversary." My lawyer kept looking at her notes, giving us the dignity of privacy, without abandoning the structure of the room. Nia cried quietly. I remained seated, hands flat on my knees, feeling no triumph at all. Some endings are too expensive to enjoy. The divorce finalized in late February, on a wet morning that smelled like thawing pavement and burnt coffee from the courthouse kiosk downstairs. I walked out with a folder under my arm and no cinematic sense of release, just lightness in practical places. No more waiting for explanations that arrived dressed as theories. No more calibrating my tone, so her choices would not feel judged. I drove back through downtown, stopped at a carryout for lake trout and fries, and ate in my truck while listening to an Orioles spring training segment on the radio. That meal tasted real again. Grief had not left, but it had stopped swallowing every other sensation. That is how healing actually shows up quietly, without announcement. In March, I gave my mother's bracelet to Rochelle, not because it meant nothing anymore, but because it meant too much to leave frozen in the chapter where it got stranded. Rochelle cried when I fastened it around her wrist at Sunday dinner. She said, "You sure?" I said yes, and for once I was. Some gifts need to be rerouted, not hoarded. Later that evening, I walked home past a church lot where kids were learning double Dutch with more confidence than coordination. Mr. Dennis was in his garage, tuning a radio that crackled between stations. He looked up and said, "Sometimes clear sound takes patience." I laughed harder than the line deserved, then thanked him anyway. I do not think about the tweet every day now. Some weeks, not at all. But on anniversaries of hard things, memory has a way of checking the locks. What stays with me is not the bar photo or even the sentence she wrote. It is the moment in my truck when I chose not to chase a public humiliation